What's going on? It's your boy, Brother L, and I'm back with another one. And this one is on some updates on the Diddy trial. All right. So I want to let y'all know what's been going on. Of course, this is a paraphrase of it. Uh, Federal cases are not televised. So if you want to know exactly word for word what happened, you have to find court transcripts. And even with those transcripts, those are just notes taken by journalists or YouTube journalists. We're gonna call YouTube journalists too. They're taken by journalists, um, shorthanded notes. So most notes not even gonna have everything word for word. That's just how federal courts are. It's a free and open court system, but you cannot show film. You cannot have film in there, no audio recordings. So you just had to read those transcripts. But these are according to the transcripts what happened today. They brought in, okay, so the prosecution brought in another star witness. They had a expert psychologist in there. All right. Forgive me, I forget the name off the top of my head. So forgive me for that, man. Ding me for that one. Um, but anyways, this woman, she was cross-examined by the defense, and let me tell you, today the defense. I mean, I guess when you got a billionaire's lawyer, the best lawyers that money can buy. This defense ripped the psychologist to shreds. I mean, from witness to witness, the only one that they kind of fumbled on and laid the egg on was the male prostitute. They that kind of landed flat, but with Cassie and the first day of Cassie kind of landed flat, but it was like all right, it was like they got rocked at that first day of Cassie, and then they kind of went along. But anyways, I digress. Today's witness was severely cross-examined real bad by the defense, and so, anyways, it starts off with like the psychologist, going over everything, saying how long she's been a psychologist, and this psychologist is a woman. And so the woman says, she's been on and off for a while. They get to talking, and he like the lawyers. If you follow them, they had a strategy. They kind of soften you up. They soften you up and they come buddy buddy with you, right? And then they just wham hit you with the hard one, and then it's like, yeah, and you don't even see it coming. They they talking to the psychologist, and they're like, yeah, so you've been doing it for a while. You've been practicing psychology since the 20th century, and the whole courtroom like kind of laughs and everything. So that's when you know the defense is just buttering you up, softening you up for the fall. They just that's just the bombardment on the beach for the invasion to come in later on. So they get to talking and all of that. Uh, Asks about how much she makes. They start getting to the money. Excuse me. So she says, well, today here I'm making 6,000 a day plus $200 $600 an hour. So she's getting 6,000 for the day and 600 on the hour. She testified for 2 hours. So altogether, she got $7,200 just for 2 hours worth of work that she did that day. And guess what? They asked who paying her. So this is supposed to be. Keep in mind, this is supposed to be a neutral third party witness, right? A scientist that they're supposed to be bringing in, talking about psychology and why did Cassie stay with Diddy. Okay, that's why the prosecution brought the psychologist in. Why to explain why did Cassie take 11 years of beatings and forced freak offs, according to the prosecution, right? Why did she stay that long? And then the prosecution, went through that and questioned her on that, and she explained that, you know, the love bombing and all the things. Now the thing about psychology is they just, for them to be relevant, they don't really, they're supposed to come out with things that change how we interact with the human brain. But a lot of the psychologists come out and they just reinvent names of old terms. So, they're going to say that they catch some type of Stockholm syndrome, where you basically, you don't, basically, this is what Stockholm syndrome, all of this, lover boy, all of this stuff that they talk about, like what happened with Andrew Tate. They basically just say that the woman has no accountability at all while she stayed for the abuse. It was no fault of her own. And also, that's another key, because you notice I keep saying her, and all of that. The defense asks the psychologist, have you ever gave a testimony for a man? Have you ever gave a testimony for a male defendant? And the psychologist said, I will never give a testimony for an offender. And they said that the courtroom was silent. You could hear a pin drop, not a noise, not a peep for like 2 minutes. It was literally a mic drop moment. And like the defense just let the court just meditate on it. I'm surprised that the judge wouldn't even say, "Hey, can we move this along? What's the hold up?" You know, but it was silent for that long, and it's like when you just fester on that and think on that, let that simmer in your head that this psychologist is totally compromised. She views she views male defendants in the courtrooms as all sex offenders and abusers. Like, that's how she views anybody that is in the defendant seat. She already sees the man as guilty. But keep in mind, she's supposed to be a neutral scientist simply giving her scientific opinion. And also, it doesn't stop there. She they asked the psychologist, "Have you visited the government, which is the prosecution if you don't know. They're trying to nail Diddy. Have you ever visited the government after the trial's start date?" She said yes. Keep in mind, this trial is not even 2 weeks old yet. And they asked, the defense team asked the psychologist, "How many times have you visited the government?" She said about 6 to 7 times. 6 to 7 times. That's almost like what's every single day. And then what really buried this witness was when the defense asked, "Well, have you helped them with their briefs?" And then the psychologist was like, it was crazy. Um, these witnesses that this guy, I don't want to, you got to understand this too. If you look at this case logically, and number one, I want to dispel any disclaimers that I support violence against women. That is not the case. I do not support that. So I'm looking at this simply like, because this is what the jury's supposed to do. They're simply supposed, and I'm sorry I keep cutting off the ideas, but this is why they ask all these questions before trial. Do you think the defendant is guilty? Yes or no? Or you have to see it with the preponderance of the evidence. If you check off yes, the defendant is guilty, you can't be on a jury because you have to make an unbiased decision based off of the evidence beyond a reasonable doubt for a guilty conviction. And they charged him with RICO, with running a criminal enterprise for the purposes of sex trafficking. There's not one piece of evidence of Diddy himself sex trafficking. They're trying to get him for conspiracy. That's why they had to charge him with the RICO, because there's really no evidence. And that's really the danger in the RICO, because you can lose the case based off of conspiracy. You don't really need evidence. And I think that's what everybody is missing. People saying, there's no evidence that he set up a criminal enterprise. Doesn't matter. As long as there is a conspiracy. So that's why it's important to listen to the end of my videos. Because if you really think, like, I think there's no evidence. He should walk, right? If I'm on a jury, which I'm not, but if I was on the jury, I'm like, there's no evidence for the RICO. There's no evidence for sex trafficking. There's evidence of a toxic relationship that had domestic violence all over it and drug abuse. These are two things that were fussing and fighting all the time. That hired prostitutes from off the streets through the internet, actually. But like, this is, there's no RICO. But the way how they can do it is, that's why the jury is, that's why the prosecution is playing so hard on the jury's emotions. And that's why the psychologist came in 6 to 7 times. I think it's like 6 to 8. I don't know. Read the transcripts, but at minimum 6 times. I know I heard 6. That's why they came in so many times, almost every day, because to train the prosecution to jar and work on and play on the emotions of the jury. So Diddy might actually win this case based off of the arguments of the lawyers, based off of there's no evidence of any RICO. But because RICO is all about, that's why they had to do RICO. They had to do RICO because there is no evidence. So they had to do RICO. And, and you might say, oh, well, if there's no evidence, well, how come she won the lawsuit? Or how come he settled? Because it's different. In a criminal case, it's beyond you had to be found beyond a reasonable doubt based off what the law says. And what is the RICO law? Criminal conspiracy. Influence. That's why I say influence. Racketeering, influence. Everybody forgets about that influence part. If the jury is thinking about this emotionally and they say, well, he influenced Cassie to do it, that's where the RICO comes in. That's when he get nailed to the wall. So let me know what you think. I think it could go either way. I just don't know. It's all up to the jury, and if they in an emotional state, he's done. If they base it off of the evidence itself, he's gonna walk. But then that's where the RICO comes in, and that's where it can get real hairy. So let me know down in the comment section what you think. Give the video a like, subscribe, and also turn on post notification bell so that you can get all the latest content. Peace. Love y'all.